guys, welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be going through my eyeshadow palette collection. I felt like it was about time for me to do a declutter. So if you are new to my channel, you may not be aware that like every year in January I do this massive declutter series. It's usually like a week-long thing. I film 5 different videos and I go through my entire makeup collection. I show you everything that I have and then I get rid of stuff that's old or that I'm not using so I can like start fresh for the new year. And for a while I was thinking maybe I should hold off and wait to do an eyeshadow palette declutter until I'm ready to film that series. But honestly, I'm at this point now where I know there are palettes I'm not using. I'm probably not going to use them for the next 3 months, and I would much rather give them away now than wait 3 months, like when in that time somebody else could be using them and appreciating them. I also know I'm going to Ipsy live in a couple of weeks in New York City, which I'm so excited about. It's basically the newly rebranded Generation Beauty if you've been to those events in the past. So if you've ever been to any of these beauty events before, like BeautyCon or Generation Beauty, you know you come home with a lot of swag. So between that and Boxycharm and FabFitFun, which I've paid for, you know, through the end of the year, I know I'm gonna be getting even more stuff. So I just figured this is a good time to take stock of what I have, to make a little bit of room, to let go of some things to friends and family, and I thought you guys might just like to sit in on the process. Also, just as an aside, if you're gonna be at Ipsy Live in New York City, definitely leave a comment and let me know. I'm going to be there on Saturday for the regular event, and I'm also gonna be going to Creator Day on Friday. So if you're gonna be there, whether it be Friday and or Saturday, I would love to see you. Please say hi if you see me. And if I know you're gonna be there, I will definitely try to hunt you down. So leave a comment, let me know if you're gonna be going. But as for the decluttering today, I'm gonna be showing you guys all 49 palettes in my collection. I know that's a lot, or well, I don't even know, honestly, what a lot is anymore. I feel like YouTube has totally just warped our perception on normalcy in makeup. Some people have hundreds of palettes, some people feel like 10 is a lot. I don't even know anymore. I just feel like I know I'm never gonna use that many eyeshadow palettes, and I'm definitely not using all of them now. Okay, so now that all the disclaimers are out of the way, let's get into the declutter. So let's start out with a couple of things I know I'm definitely going to keep. These are the only 2 Anastasia Beverly Hills eyeshadow palettes that I own, and I really love them both. So I have Soft Glam, which is just a beautiful neutral palette. It's more warm toned. Norvina said when she designed this that she wanted something that could be used on brides or for prom. Like, there are shades that you can use for every day, but also could be used to create a really beautiful soft glam look, and I actually have used this on my friends doing their wedding makeup, and I enjoy it a lot for those kinds of looks. And then this guy is newer. This is the Jackie Aina palette, which I have talked about a bunch here on my channel recently. I am loving this color palette for fall. These shades to me are a little bit more unique. Like, sponsored here is a really gorgeous duochromatic green that's honestly unlike anything else I have in my collection. I have a lot of those blue-brown shades, but this one, it's got a more greenish cast. It's really cool, and obviously, as you can see, super pigmented. The mattes in here are true to ABH's formula. Super smooth, not chalky at all, rich in pigment. And then you have like this shade which is called Zam, which is just like the most glittery, gorgeous beautifulness put all over the lid. This honestly may be my current favorite new palette. I feel so inspired by these colors. I love reaching for this. I'm definitely nowhere near sick of it yet. I have only barely scratched the surface, I feel like, of things I can do with this guy. So I definitely intend on keeping this palette in my collection for a very long time. Another 2 I know I am 100% keeping are my 2 Nabla Cosmetics palettes. I have the Secret palette and the Soul Blooming palette. These are also 2 absolute favorites in my collection. The Soul Blooming is more of a springtime color palette. You have some really gorgeous pinks and purples in here. This shade Flowery is like especially unique to me. You don't see this kind of cornflower blue often in palettes, and look at just how pigmented and creamy that is. I also love the shade Garden Gate, which is a beautiful blue-pink duochrome. It just gives me like straight up ethereal fairy vibes. And I also really like this shade Philosophy. I use this a lot as an inner corner highlight. It's really unique in that it flashes kind of like blue and green and pink depending on how it catches the light. It's a really fun shade. Now, I had to order this guy off of the Nabla Cosmetics website because right now it's not being carried at Ulta, but I really, really hope they end up bringing it there eventually. This guy, however, you can get at Ulta right now, the Secret Palette, and this is a really great fall color story. Even though this launched back at the end of May, I feel like these shades definitely are going to transition really well into the cooler weather. Like, you have this super dark green called Rosemary. This is a gorgeous, very, very vampy fall color. You also have this really rich bronzy gold called Creation Crown. This is another one I love all over the lid. Just like, look at how shiny and beautiful that is. And then the mattes in here are absolutely amazing. I love Nabla's matte formula. It's so silky and smooth. This shade Ghibli I use all the time as like a crease transition. So yeah, big fan of Nabla eyeshadow palettes. I love their formula. I love the color stories of both of these guys, and I definitely intend on using them a bunch. So let's move on to something a little bit more difficult. I have a couple of palettes here from Pixi Beauty and then a couple of palettes from Karity. And while I do think all four of these palettes are pretty decent, I don't think I need to keep all of them. So let's talk about the Pixi palettes first. So I have two of their Eye Reflections palettes. This one here is called Reflex Light, and it is all completely shimmer. And then this one is Natural Beauty. Now, I know I reach for the Natural Beauty palette way more than I do the Reflex Light one. I don't have a lot of cool toned eyeshadow palettes, and I actually really like the formula of this guy a lot. It's very easy to work with. The shadows aren't like overly ridiculously pigmented, but they're still very soft and easy to blend. And the metallics in here are very creamy and very shiny, so they definitely give a really nice pop to the lid. So I honestly feel like this guy definitely has its place in my collection because, again, I don't have a lot of cool tone things going on. It's a more budget-friendly price point at $24, and it's just a little bit more everyday friendly. So I definitely think I want to hold on to this guy. But the Reflex Light here, I'm kind of more torn about. I do think these shades are beautiful. And again, I love the metallic formula of Pixi shadows. I think they're absolutely stunning. Like, look at how just like rich and creamy and foiled these are. But even if I like the formula of this, I know I haven't been reaching for this palette a ton. And clearly the issue is I just have so many palettes that I enjoy that this guy just gets overlooked. And unfortunately, these particular tones are fairly common because they're mostly, you know, bronzes and warm tones, and I'm sure that I have other shimmers in other palettes that are like this. So even though I think this is a great accent palette, like it would be a perfect companion to an all matte palette like the Too Faced Natural Matte or the Milani Most Loved Matte, which we will get to in a little bit, I just feel like this guy is being wasted in my collection. Like there's probably somebody else out there who could really love and appreciate it, and I would rather it go to them than it be sitting and collecting dust on my shelf. And then as for these two Karity palettes, I already have a pretty strong feeling about which of these I want to keep. I think both of them are decent palettes, but I know I'm definitely not going to get use out of one of them. And that is the matte palette. Now, I think this is a great rainbow palette. I think there are tons of really fun shades in here, and I don't think the formula of this palette is bad at all. But realistically speaking, I know I've had this for over a year, and I pretty much never reach for it. I do colorful looks, but a lot of times I'm doing them right from one singular palette. I'm not reaching into palettes like this to create those kinds of colorful looks. So I feel like as a result of that, this palette has gone relatively unused. And knowing that there are some other colorful palettes I definitely want to keep from the Beauty Crop and from Juvia's place, I feel like I know I'm going to be more likely to reach into those guys than I'm going to ever be to reach into this. On the flip side, I do think I want to hold on to the Picante palette. This one especially is so fun for fall. I just talked about it in a recent video. So I feel like I would like to try to get some use out of this guy now that fall is officially here. It's been a while since I've reached for this palette just because I've been into wearing more summery colors, but this is like the most seasonally appropriate thing. And if come January I'm still not digging it, then maybe I'll consider decluttering it. But for now, I think I'd like to hold on to this guy. Some more definite keeps for me are my Persona palettes. I have the Copper Color Theory kit. I have the original Identity 1 palette, and then I also have the brand new Identity 2 palette. And I really enjoy all of these. I think Persona has one of the best eyeshadow formulas like ever. It's so easy to work with. The pigmentation is on point. The shimmers are gorgeous. Honestly, of all of these, I probably use the Copper palette the most just because it's super everyday wearable. I love these warm tones, and like the pigmentation on this, just look, is so beautiful. Just not like overly pigmented to the point where it's difficult to work with, but you can blend things out and build them up really nicely. It's just a really pretty everyday palette. And then the Identity palettes both have, again, really great everyday wearable shades. The original Identity palette is definitely more neutral, whereas Identity 2 has more pops of color. I actually really like the way these two palettes pair together. I feel like this palette gives some more anchoring matte shades to this guy so that you can create even more looks. Like, especially like this shade, Independent, is a really beautiful purple, and I feel like it is really nice next to this matte shade Chic in the Identity 1 palette if you want to do more of a purple look. So yeah, I know I definitely enjoy these. I use these 100% planning on keeping them. So I want to talk about a bunch of palettes that I've received from Boxycharm. If you are a Boxycharm subscriber and you are someone that's been subscribed for many consecutive months, you know over time you build up quite the collection of palettes. And while I have enjoyed most of these, I honestly feel like a lot of them are kind of taking up space in my collection. I'm not using them enough, and I feel inclined at this point to pass them along before they just get super old. So let's just go through the stack. The first one I have here is this Blinc palette. I actually love the formula of this so much. I haven't reached for it nearly enough, and it's obviously seen better days. I cracked this shadow and it just keeps getting worse and worse and getting shadow everywhere. But this formula is like ultra creamy and super shiny. Like, it's really beautiful. But I don't know, it might just be time to declutter this from my collection because I haven't been reaching for it. It's obviously a little bit abused, and I'm sure, again, I have these kind of metallic shades in other palettes. This guy here is a little bit newer. This one's from Butter London. It was their, what? I don't even remember what they call this. Natural Goddess palette, maybe? It's not on here. I love the packaging. I think it's beautiful. But these shades are kind of like, I don't know. They don't really excite me all that much. Like, the green in here is pretty, the blue in here is pretty, but the brown tones and the pink tones, again, fairly common. You know, the pigmentation on these is not bad. The mattes are a little stiff, but like, I don't know. I don't think this is a bad palette. I just don't foresee myself getting a lot of use out of it, and it's something that I feel like a friend may appreciate more, so I'm pretty inclined to pass this guy on. Then there is the Pretty Vulgar Nightingale palette. I've had this one for a while, and I held on to this for a long time because it's a cool tone palette. I don't have a lot of cool tone palettes, and I do enjoy the shades in here. At the same time, I think I like the Pixi palette I showed you guys earlier more than I like this. So I just don't think I'm really gonna get a ton of use out of this guy. I just think this is kind of taking up space in my collection. I do enjoy Pretty Vulgar. I love the design of this palette. I think it's really pretty. It's just, it's not something I'm getting enough use out of. This guy though, I know I definitely want to keep. This is the Alamar Cosmetics Reina del Caribe Volume 1 palette. I love this so much. These are beautiful eyeshadows. All of the mattes in here are like butter. They feel so silky. They are really rich in pigment, and the metallic shades in here are like out of this world stunning. If you've never seen this palette before, I mean, like, look at that. How ridiculously gorgeous. This shade El Malacon too, like, ooh, the most interesting, like, gold green shade. I honestly don't think I have anything else quite like that somewhere else in my collection. So yeah, this is like a no-brainer. Definitely keeping. But then honestly, the rest of these guys I could probably live without. I have the Ace Beaute Grandiose palette. Really pretty palette. Has some nice warm shades in here. But again, this doesn't inspire me all that much. Like, it's nice, but it's not something that I find myself being inclined to reach for. I feel like I used it maybe like 4 or 5 times when I first got it, but then since then, haven't really touched it. Same thing goes for the Pur Festival palette. I really don't think this is a bad palette, like, at all. I actually think these shades are pretty easy to work with. I love the pressed glitters that are in here, but most of these neutral colors, I've got in other palettes. I have other bright purples and other bright pinks, so like nothing in here is unique enough, and I think if I was going to be looking for these shades, I would probably prefer them in other formulations. And then my Violet Voss HG palette. I have talked about this a bunch because I think it's a great palette for people that like everyday wearable shades. It's warm, it's neutral with like a little bit of color to it. It's like very, very approachable color with shades like this Wine and Dine or Hashtag or Cranberry Splash. But again, I really want to have a makeup collection that like I look at everything in it and I am so excited to use it, that it makes me happy and I'm not feeling like, oh, well, I guess I should probably use that because it's been a while even though I don't really want to. And I feel like those are the vibes I get with this palette. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it, and I don't think the quality of these shadows are poor. Like, I'll swatch a few for you. They feel pretty nice and smooth. That's Are You Kidding Me? Maybe the shade Glamping here. Like, that's a nice shimmer. I just know I don't see this and like lose my mind and get really excited, and warm tones are things that are very easy to find nowadays, so I don't know. I feel like there are some people in my life that would love this palette, so it seems very selfish for me to keep it and not be really using it. So let's move on to some Milani palettes next. I have 3 of them. I have 2 of these 12 pan palettes, the Most Loved Mattes and the Bold Obsessions, and then I also have one of these newer cardboard palettes. This is the Gilded Noir. Now I will say overall, I really enjoy the Milani eyeshadow formula, and right now I don't think I will be decluttering any of these guys. I think I probably reach for the Most Loved Mattes palette the most, just because this is like the perfect thing to reach into. Let's say I have like a liquid glitter I want to use or some kind of shimmery shade I want to put all over the lid. I can either create a warm tone, a purple toned, or a neutral toned base. But Bold Obsessions I feel like is a little bit more travel friendly because you've got mattes and shimmers. Each row kind of has like a corresponding color story to it, so you can go neutral, warm, or cool. And I think the formula of the shadows in both of these palettes is great. Like the mattes are pretty well pigmented. These metallic shades are a little flaky, but dang, they are shiny and pretty as heck. This guy I have more mixed feelings about. This one is newer. I think the metallic shades in here are really unique and fun. Like they have some really cool, interesting shimmers in here. This blue called Gasp especially might just be one of the most beautiful blue metallic shades I have in my entire collection. But you don't really have many mattes in here. You have Entitled and Lust and Dark Side, and that's kind of about it. So I feel like this palette is much more limiting as far as being able to use it by itself. But knowing that I do have so many other matte options in other palettes, I don't mind so much. So again, this is something I think I want to hold on to. I think some of these colors will be really fun to play with in the fall and winter. And if I'm not really loving it come January, then maybe it's something I'll declutter. So next I've got a nice little stack here of Drugstore palettes. I have one of the 10 pan color icons from Wet n Wild. I have the LA Girl Hot Hot Heat palette, and then I have these 2 guys from Profusion, the Metallics palette and the Spectrum palette. Now, this guy here, the Wet n Wild Rosé in the Air palette, survived my declutter back at the beginning of 2019, mostly because I wanted to have an affordable palette that I could use in videos, and I know this is a dupe for Modern Renaissance, so I honestly feel like I held on to this more because I have a YouTube channel than I did because I actually like this palette or gravitate towards it. I don't think that there's necessarily anything wrong with these shadows, and I think these tones are nice. You know, you have a decent amount of pigmentation here. They're not like overly patchy shadows or chalky or anything like that. Again, I think part of it is just that it was never a palette that really blew my mind. So I think I'm just at a point now where I feel like this is a little unnecessary for me. I don't really need this palette, and I think maybe somebody else could enjoy it, so I think I want to pass this guy on. But I think I do still want to keep my LA Girl Hot Hot Heat palette. I got this over the summer from CVS. This is such a fun colorful palette. It has a very summery color story to it. You have all these purples and pinks, and oh my goodness, this glittery teal shade is so fun. But yeah, in general, I have really enjoyed using this palette. This shade up here is a beautiful transition. These purples are a lot of fun, and I think I will definitely want to reach for this guy again, especially next spring and summer. So I'm gonna hold on to this. But then these two palettes I'm torn by. So first let's talk about the Spectrum palette. So if you guys saw the video I did reviewing these two, I kind of did like a first impressions try on. I really struggled with some of the shades in this palette. I didn't feel like they built up well on my eyes. It just was not my favorite formula. It's just a little bit scratchy. Like you can feel these to the touch. They're not the smoothest shadows, and they do have a fair amount of pigmentation, but just they can be a little bit dusty and a little bit patchy. Now mind you, this is a $5 eyeshadow palette, so it's not like I was expecting miracles, but even for a $5 eyeshadow palette, I don't use rainbow palettes like this all that often, much like the Karity mattes, and I like this formula even less than that, so I don't think I want to hold on to this. But this palette I feel torn by. I think these shades are beautiful, and while these are kind of chunky metallics, a lot of these are really nice. Like we have this really fun, vibrant red shade, like this would be great for fall, or like this bronzy gold called Mic Drop. Super stunning. Focus is like a chocolatey brown. We've got this greenish shade called Blitz. This one you can see is like a little more on the chunky side. It's more of like a glitter topper. So I definitely feel torn by this guy. It's a big palette. It's kind of chunky. It takes up a lot of space. I don't find myself reaching in here a whole ton. Also, as you can clearly see by how much of a hot mess this palette is, like it is a messy palette. These shadows fluff everywhere. They're very chunky. They create a lot of fallout. So they're not my favorite to work with. Again, I think this would be a fun palette if you were looking for something all metallic, if you didn't have a lot of shimmery shades and you wanted things to accent matte palettes that you may already have. You know, it is fun to play with and it's super affordable at only $10. But given that I have so many options at this point in time, it just doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense for me to hold on to this. So next I've got my Juvia's Place palettes, and I actually only have 2 of them. I've owned other ones in the past, but I have decluttered them. And honestly, I'm still pretty happy with these palettes. I haven't really been inspired to buy a new Juvia's Place palette, but I don't have any desire to get rid of either of these guys. So this one here on the end is the Doucce palette. This to me reminds me of like a French bakery. It just has those like macaron colors. Like it just looks delicious in my opinion. And Juvia's Place palettes, I mean, I'm sure you guys know the mattes are like ultra smooth and pigmented, like really beautiful, vibrant colors. And the metallic shades are also like ultra shiny, ultra creamy. Like look at that minty green. So while this palette I feel like kind of has a little bit of a weird color story, like using these shades together is a little bit of a challenge sometimes, I do still really like having these shadows in my collection. And then the other palette is the original Magic palette. So this is not available anymore, but they do have the Magic Mini. The shadows are exactly the same. The pans are just smaller, which honestly is probably better. You will never use all this eyeshadow in your lifetime. These pans are absolutely massive. So I think it made a lot of sense for the brand to make a more affordable, smaller version of this palette. But this palette I feel like is the reason why I feel kind of alright decluttering so many of my rainbow palettes. I think I like this formula so much, and there are so many unique bright shades in here that like this sort of fills any of those desires for me. Like look at this bright metallic green. Is that not insane? I also love this shade Faso, which is a beautiful like blue purple duochrome. It's kind of like Garden Gate from the Soul Blooming palette, but like on steroids. And then we have mattes in here, like this really vibrant red color, which again is kind of unique compared to a lot of my other palettes. So I honestly feel like this is a palette I should be reaching for more often. I definitely don't go crazy colorful all the time, so I don't feel like I need tons and tons of colorful palettes, but if I was going to keep a few, I feel like this definitely should be one of them. Speaking of colorful palettes, let's talk about what I have from the Beauty Crop, because there's a lot. So these three palettes right here are Gazing palettes from the Beauty Crop. I got these back holiday 2018, so they're not quite a year old in my collection yet. And then this is brand new. This is the Cocktail Palette book set. I just picked these up. These are like a summer launch from the Beauty Crop, very similar in layout, but they're all cocktail themed palettes. So let's start out with the Gazing palettes here. Now, honestly, I don't think I want to declutter any of these guys because I think all three of these palettes are really fun. I honestly would like to be using them more than I have been. I think I probably reach for Dawngazing the most just because these are very wearable tones, wearable colorful tones, I should say. I've frequently compared this palette to Urban Decay's Naked Cherry because I feel like the shades in here are very similar to that. I don't own Naked Cherry, and part of the reason is because I already own this, and this actually also has a really fun pressed glitter, so it's even more up my alley, honestly. But I think the Beauty Crop's eyeshadow formula is really quite nice. The mattes are fairly smooth, they have a nice amount of pigmentation, and the metallics are also very foiled, very shimmery. They're a little bit of a thicker texture, so I think if you had very textured eyelids, I don't know how great they would work for you, but in general, I found them to be very flattering on my eyes. Then I've got Sungazing here, and this one is more of your fiery, warm-toned, neutral tones. I love this gold glitter in here. Also, this orangey one is a lot of fun. Like, this definitely is a more shiny palette. There are only two matte shades in here, Amber and Soul, so I kind of feel like this is not the best standalone palette, I suppose, but it certainly is a lot of fun. I feel like, honestly, like the new Naked Honey palette came out, and part of the reason why I've had absolutely no desire to buy it is that I feel like I can create very similar looks with this palette right here. Like, this shade Apollo is very similar to that bright gold shade that's in there. And then the last of the Gazing palettes is Stargazing. This one is a lot of fun. It's a little more celestial. It's got some brighter colors in here, and these again are more unique shades in my collection, so it's just fun to have this on hand for when I want like a lilac purple glitter or a pink glitter or this really cool like olivey green shade. This actually would be great for a fall look. So yeah, I just don't really feel inclined to declutter any of these three palettes because I feel like they are a little bit fun, they're different. The Beauty Crop is a brand that's not talked about very often, and each of these palettes is only $24.50, so they're not like outrageous when it comes to price point. And then obviously the cocktail palettes I just got, so I don't want to declutter these yet since I have not even used them on camera. I did just swatch all of these and photograph them for my blog, so hopefully I'll be able to get that up for you guys sometime in the coming weeks. But these are also just a lot of fun. Very similar in vein. You have the Sangria palette is kind of a bluish purpley palette. Then Pina Colada is more of a rainbow palette. This honestly reminds me a lot of one of the new Juvia's Place palettes. I cannot for the life of me remember which one it is, but these sort of like darker, grungier rainbow colors, like this very much feels like Juvia's Place to me. And then Strawberry Daiquiri is more of a red toned palette, which also has this really cool, like very, very duochromatic glitter in it. And then Mojito is a green palette, which I really don't have a green theme palette aside from this one. So this, I think, also will be really fun for some fall looks. All right, then I have this random collection of higher end palettes to go through. So this right here is something I actually saved from a previous declutter. I was gonna get rid of this palette, and then I thought about it more, and then I decided that I couldn't let it go. This is a limited edition palette. You can't get it anymore, so I don't really use it on camera, but I do reach for it like every once in a while because I really do love these shades. This is the Tarte Make Believe in Yourself palette, and this is basically just a collection of very soft, ethereal, sort of shimmery shades. This shade Trance is probably like my favorite taupey, just like gorgeous shimmery shade to put all over the lid. I also really like Marvel a lot, which is kind of more of an icy green. These two are probably the ones I reach for the most. But yeah, this is one of those things I think I'm just gonna hold on to for the foreseeable future. Even if it's a limited edition, I feel like just because you're a YouTuber and people can't get something anymore doesn't mean you should like get rid of every single limited edition product in your collection. So I'm gonna keep it. Then I've got my Too Faced Natural Matte palette. I adore this palette. I actually reach for it quite a bit just because, you know, it's boring. It's just mattes, but they are so great for like a quick and easy everyday look. Another one you guys know I'm definitely keeping is the Huda Beauty New Nude palette. This is one of my all-time favorite palettes ever, ever, ever. I love this color story. This color story is me in a palette. And you also have beautiful metallics in here. You have pressed glitters in here. This is just so much fun to play with. Whenever I'm feeling kind of these rosy, mauve-y tones, this is the palette that I reach for. Another one that I know I really enjoy and I'm going to keep, this is newer-ish to my collection, is the Ciate Astrolights palette. This was actually a holiday 2018 launch, but I didn't get it until recently because it was available as like a FabFitFun add-on for like $14. This is a $30-something palette, so it was a really good deal. And this is just an adorable little palette. I mean, first of all, look at the stars embossed on here and the little bow. I think that's so, so sweet. But then these shades themselves are beautiful. And again, you guys know, I've mentioned a few times, like these sort of warm tones, the coppers, etc. Like you've seen them a bunch now probably in this video. And that's why I knew I didn't need a million palettes with the same color story. Like I knew I wanted to keep this palette, and that's one of the reasons why I feel like I don't necessarily need, for example, like the Violet Voss Holy Grail palette. Now, this guy here is another limited edition palette that I'm pretty sure has been discontinued, so I don't really talk about it that much anymore, don't use it a lot on camera, but every once in a while, I love reaching into this guy. It's the Jouer Skinny Dip palette, and these shimmery shades are really beautiful. I feel like when this first launched, it was a lot more unique because there weren't a lot of makeup companies launching these really like ultra glittery metallic shades, but now we kind of see them all the time. Still, there's something about this I really enjoy. The shade Magic Hour is like, oh my goodness, one of the most beautiful, like molten, glittery, like if you're doing a smoky eye kind of shades, like the most stunning. So yeah, this is just a fun one. This one's just shimmery. It's nice to reach for if I want just like a pop of something on the lid. Again, when I have all these like all matte palettes, this is something I like to use with one of those. And I have to say, it's really nice that this guy is so skinny. Like it's a really thin palette. It's very easy for me to store. So it's one of those things that I almost don't mind making room for in my collection. Then we have the good old Too Faced Sweet Peach palette. How can I let this guy go? It's the only like full-sized Too Faced palette that I own. I don't have any of the chocolate bars or anything like that. I never actually did own any of them. And I think part of it was the color stories of those never really spoke to me, but this one definitely did. I love these warm tones with the purples, with the greens, the peaches. Like this to me is definitely a summer into fall palette. I just talked about it in a recent like fall makeup video, and you know, I definitely enjoy busting this guy out every once in a while. I feel like this is one of those palettes that when it launched was so insanely hyped, and now it's just like completely fallen off of the face of the earth. Like who talks about the Sweet Peach palette anymore, you know? And then finally, the last two left here, the Dose of Colors Friendcation palette and the Zoeva Cocoa Blend. This guy right here, I also thought I was going to declutter back in January. Like I listed it on my Poshmark. I was ready to let go of this guy because this is something that I bought last year, and I was just like, I don't know if I'm using it enough. But then it never sold, and then I just started to think about it, and I was like, you know what? Maybe I should just give Zoeva a chance. And then Zoeva started being carried at Ulta, and I'm like, you know what? Maybe it would be nice to use this guy more, especially if people are curious about this palette now that it's easier to get in the US. So this was another one that I rescued. It was almost lost forever from my collection, but I decided to keep it. And honestly, these shadows are really not bad quality-wise. The mattes in here are pretty smooth, got a good amount of pigment, and the metallic shades are also pretty buttery, pretty smooth. Like at this point, you know, it's tough because there are so many good eyeshadow formulas out there. I feel like when this first launched, it was better comparatively than it is now, but it's still a really solid formula, and for the price, which is under $30, I don't think it's a bad palette. And then of course this guy I absolutely love. I just wore this in a video the other day. I used this olive green shade called Dirty Martini in a look for fall, and I adore it. I think this palette is beautiful. I love the glitters in here because they are just like super shiny, kind of a more unique formula. I definitely like to apply these over a glitter primer just to help minimize fallout. But yeah, this is one of those things, you know, I bought it from Ulta way back when it first launched. I paid full price for it, but I have no regrets because I definitely have reached for this many a time, and I think I will continue to reach for it for many months to come. All right, guys, we are almost to the very end. So I have two palettes from Alter Ego here. I have the Goddess palette and the Daydream palette. These were sent over to me from the brand to test out. The Goddess palette is a dupe for the Natasha Denona Gold palette, and the Daydream palette is a dupe for the Huda Beauty New Nude palette. So I have used both of these on camera before. I did a video comparing this palette to the original Huda one, and I think there are definitely strong points about this, but there are also weak points about this. I think the metallics in here are actually a little bit more vibrant than the ones in the Huda palette, but you need to put a base underneath them. If you don't use like the sticky concealer base in here, I feel like the metallics don't stick well to the eyes, but if you do layer them over them, they are even more punchy than the ones in the Huda palette. But the mattes in here I just struggled with. I don't find them to be quite as easy to build up and blend out as the ones in the Huda palette. So ultimately, I feel like I don't really need to keep this guy since I know I'm gonna keep New Nude and I love that palette, and I've already done a video doing like a comparison, so it kind of feels like I don't really need to keep this guy. But I don't own the Natasha Denona Gold palette, and I do like this color story, and it would be nice to still have something from Alter Ego in my collection. So I think I would like to hold on to this guy. Let me just do a few quick swatches so you can see sort of what these shadows look like. Like, they definitely have decent pigmentation. They're maybe like a little patchy in the swatch, and they don't have the best like sticking power to the eyes, but they're not bad. And the metallics are very shiny and pretty, a little chunky. I feel like this palette definitely suffers from having a bit of fallout, but for the price, which is $16 for this guy, $18 for this guy, like if you're looking for a budget-friendly eyeshadow palette and are willing to, you know, play with things and make it work, I think they're not so bad. All right, you guys knew they had to be coming, right? So I have three palettes here from ColourPop. I have the Element of Surprise palette, which is no longer available. And then I also have the Sweet Talk palette and the California Love palette. So I'm gonna tell you guys right now, I'm keeping all of my ColourPop palettes because I absolutely adore them. I think ColourPop has one of the best eyeshadow formulas out there, and they are so affordable. I really have no idea how exactly they do it, but I'm not gonna complain. So Element of Surprise is more of a warm tone palette, again with like a pop of purple. This is very similar to the Ciate palette, and this guy is quite a bit older than that one. So this is something that may not have a ton of time left in my collection because it's already a couple years old, so you know, it may have another solid year or so with me before I end up decluttering it. But in the meantime, I love this color story. I think these shadows like look so beautiful together, so I definitely want to keep it. And then Sweet Talk I just adore. I've talked about this a gajillion times and how much I absolutely love it. I don't know why I was on the fence for such a long time deciding whether or not to pick up this palette, but I'm so glad that I did. These glitters that are in here are absolutely stunning. You also get a Super Shock shadow in here in this shade called Side to Side. This is just a beautiful glittery top coat almost. Oh, my fingers and my hand are so stained right now. I apologize for how crazy it's looking. But anyway, you guys get the gist. This is not like a pigmented shade. It just adds a beautiful sparkle that you can layer over the top of these other shadows. So yeah, Sweet Talk is definitely not going anywhere. And then California Love is newer to me. My friend got this for me for my birthday back in July, and I've used this a little bit, but definitely not enough. And I feel like these tones would actually still be really flattering moving into fall, so I'm looking forward to experimenting with this. So yeah, even though this guy is fairly basic as far as having just warm brown tones, I think it's a really flattering color story, and I know how much I love the ColourPop formula, so this guy, not going anywhere. And then finally, the last two palettes in my collection are both giant, and they're both influencer collabs. And these two palettes I am having a really hard time with because I feel very conflicted. So I have the Emily Edit The Wants palette from Makeup Revolution, and I have the Jaclyn Hill palette from Morphe. So let's start out with this guy. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I'm not a huge fan of Morphe. I don't think that their products are bad. I've tried a few things, they're fine. I don't know. I honestly feel like the influencers they choose to work with, the controversies around the brand, like I'm not really into it. I'm not a dramatic person. And knowing that there are so many makeup brands out there, I honestly would rather support some slightly less dramatic brands over Morphe. That's just my prerogative. And obviously I picked up this palette many moons ago. I used to be a pretty big fan of Jaclyn Hill, and I definitely wanted to support her in the collab and this palette. I mean, it's beautiful. So many people absolutely love this. But after her whole debacle with her own makeup brand, I am not really watching her videos anymore. I'm not really interested in supporting her just because I think some things are kind of shady. If you like her, if you watch her videos, again, that's totally your prerogative. I'm not going to judge. But I definitely feel a little weird about using this palette now on camera just because I'm not really super keen on supporting either Jaclyn Hill or Morphe. But I do also know this palette is very popular. I know a lot of people have this palette. It does have a great color story. There are so many options in here, and I don't think these shadows are bad. I've definitely used them time and time again. This palette's obviously super dirty and a hot mess for a good reason. So I don't know what to do with this. I'm kind of tempted to keep it just because I know it's a very requested palette for tutorials because so many people own it. But again, I just I'm not really super into supporting the brand or supporting Jaclyn at this point in time. So you guys will definitely have to let me know in the comments, how are you feeling about this palette? Do you still think it's worth holding onto, worth using on camera? Are you sick of seeing it? Are you kind of over either Morphe and or Jaclyn? What is the general climate out there with this guy? And then this palette, I feel like I have like the exact opposite problem with. I adore Emily. I've been watching her channel for years. I think she is one of the good ones out there. She's so genuine. She gives such good information. She tries to be as unbiased as a person can be in the makeup world. And I was so excited for her when she announced that she was collaborating with Makeup Revolution. I think she is one of the people out there that's deserving of those kinds of opportunities. And I think this is a really cute palette. It has some really nice shades in here. You have a huge mirror. Also, this is a very affordable palette, like under $20. So I was entirely happy to buy this, to support her. I used this in videos way back when this palette first launched, but I honestly have not found myself reaching for this in a very long time. And I think, you know, moving into fall, just looking at this color story, I think this is a great fall palette. You have some really beautiful purples, some rosy tones, some cranberries, this green called corduroy, and also side hustle. So I don't really know what to do. Part of me is like, maybe I should give this away to somebody else just because I haven't been using it enough. But then another part of me is like, hey, maybe you should actually pull this out of your collection and do some looks with it again, because I'm sure a lot of you guys also have this palette as well. I think for now, I'm gonna keep it, but I would love to hear your thoughts on this palette and whether or not you're interested in still seeing me use it. All right, guys, so this is where we've landed. These are all the palettes that I'm keeping. There are 37 in total, which is definitely still a fair number. It's a lot of palettes, but knowing where we started, I'm feeling pretty good about things. And then this is what I am saying goodbye to. So it's a total of 12 palettes, which definitely is a much smaller number, but I wasn't really looking to like cut my collection in half at this point in the year. I really just wanted to slim things down a little bit and make sure I wasn't holding on to things that I really wasn't using, especially if somebody else could be enjoying them. Alright guys, that is it for today's video. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I hope you enjoyed seeing my eyeshadow palette collection and hearing my thought process as I decided what I wanted to keep and what I wanted to get rid of. Definitely leave a comment and let me know, like, if this was your eyeshadow palette collection, would you have made the same choices as me? Is there anything I let go of that you were like absolutely appalled by, or anything I kept that you're like, I don't know why you keep that hanging around? It's makeup. I won't be offended. I am always curious to know what you guys are thinking. Also, if you love declutter videos, I mean, I hope you will give this one a thumbs up if that's the case. But also know that my declutter series will be coming in a couple of months. I'm not sure if I want to do it all in one week again, or if I want to do it like on a single day of the week and then kind of spread it out over the course of the month. Let me know if you guys have a preference of one or the other. And again, if you're going to be at Ipsy Live NYC, let me know. I would love to see your faces there. And yeah, I think that's about it. If you're new and you want to come back and hang out with me again, I hope you will consider clicking that subscribe button before you go. And on that note, I'm gonna let you guys go, but I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you in my next video. Bye guys.